Hey, what's up you guys, it's Ruthie and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to go into chapter 1 of the Mothers and Daughters of the Bible Speak. So let's get right into this video. This video is going to contain topics of me speaking the Bible and just the Bible in general. If you do not wish to continue, please click off the video now. You have been warned. Jochbed and Miriam. Genesis 37, Genesis 39 through 45, verse 15. Exodus 1 through 4, verses 17, Exodus 15, verses 20 through 21. A dark world. The book of Genesis is full of mothers, from Eve to Sarah to Rebecca to Rachel and Leah. Motherhood plays a key role in the early stories of the Bible, but we rarely see these mothers interacting with their children. And of the mothers who are named in Genesis, Leah is the only one whom the Bible mentions as having a daughter. Not until we get to Exodus do we meet the first mother-daughter pair we see interacting with each other in Scripture, Jochbed and Miriam. In a way, they are the only mother-daughter duo we include in these pages. The others we will journey along with in this book are related by marriage, Ruth and Naomi, or by cousinhood, Elizabeth and Mary. When we venture into the extraordinary book of Exodus, we see the full power and beauty of the mother and daughter bond, just as the book of Exodus shows us the magnitude of God's relationship with his people Israel. The wisdom of the Bible reveals both of the miracles for us together and the story of God's intimate relationship with his people, not just Abraham and his family, or Jacob and his sons, but also the Israelite people as a whole begins here with the loving bond between mother and daughter at the beginning of an extraordinary story. Genesis shows us how Jacob's 12 sons grew and became a distinct people with their own customs and identity. Exodus takes us the next step, showing us how the Israelites then entered into a relationship with God, not as individuals but as a group, as the newly formed people of God. Exodus is about the birth of Israel as a nation, and at the very start of the divine adventure we meet Jochbed and Miriam. It is through the bravery and sacrifice of this mother and daughter that the entire story of Scripture begins to unfold. With a gift God gives us in the biblical account marked by faith, creativity, the courage of these two women. But before we dive in, let's take a look back. Hundreds of years before Jochbed and Miriam arrived on the scene, the Israelites came to Egypt in a time of crisis. Their journey was enabled by a great man, a chosen one, who had to go into exile and rise to power in a foreign land before he was finally in place to save Israel. It all started with a serious case of sibling rivalry. Though Jacob had many sons, Joseph was the offspring of Jacob's beloved wife Rachel. But there was 11 other sons, both from Jacob's other wife and Rachel's sister. Leah was, as well as sons born to Rachel and Leah's servants, as was customary to all time. That Jacob favored Joseph of all of his other brothers was no secret. He even made his favorite son a special robe to wear. Here's how our favoritism went over with Joseph's older siblings. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Genesis 37:4. Joseph must have been fully aware of both his favored position and his brother's jealousy over it. Yet when he had dreams that seemed to signal an even further evaluation of his status, he didn't hesitate to share them. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Genesis 37:5-11. Talk about not being able to read the room. Maybe Joseph spoke in humble confidence that the messages were not his, but divine in nature. In any case, his brothers were not enthused. Things became so contentious that the brothers began to plot against Joseph, which was easy to do since they were out in the remote fields tending to their herds, barely restraining themselves from killing him. They instead trapped Joseph in an empty cistern when he came out to visit them. As the brothers ate their dinner, a group of traveling merchants headed to Egypt happened by, so rather than murder Joseph, his brothers decided to sell him into slavery, and the travelers took him with them to Egypt. To round out their deception, the brothers slaughtered a goat and dipped Joseph's ornate robe in the blood, taking it back to their father. Jacob believed his beloved Joseph had been killed by a ferocious animal, Genesis 37:33, and fell into deep grief. Did any of Jacob's sons who concocted this deceptive plan ever buckle under the guilt of what they'd done? Did they have regrets when they saw how heartbroken their father Jacob was? Whether they did or didn't wrestle with their treachery, Joseph's story was really just the beginning. Once he reached Egypt, he was sold to Potiphar, once of Pharaoh's most esteemed officials. Joseph rose in prominence because in his trustworthiness and integrity. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all of that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in his house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Genesis 39:5-6. But there was trouble on the horizon. Potiphar's wife had noticed Joseph too. She was regularly tried to seduce him. Day after day, Joseph refused. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you were his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Genesis 39:9. Yet Potiphar's wife continued her advances, and on a day when they were all alone, she called to him again. Joseph refused again and ran away from her so quickly that he left his cloak behind, and Potiphar's wife took full advantage of that, framing him for attempted rape. Despite what Potiphar knew about Joseph's character, he believed his wife's story, and Joseph was thrown in jail. It's easy to see how bitterness might have taken hold in Joseph's heart at this point. The most favored son in the flourishing family, he seemed to be heading for greatness. Then he faced a series of advances and setbacks, and must have in the moment felt like there was no plan or purpose after all. He was nearly killed by his own brothers. Then his brothers sold him into slavery, but he was so honorable that he rose to the top of a prominent Egyptian household. We see no indication that Joseph had dishonored the Lord or sinned, yet he was once again imprisoned and forgotten. But he was not forgotten by God. Despite his circumstances, Joseph once again lived with virtue. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. Genesis 39:20-22. Thrown into one disastrous predicament after another, Joseph over and over again chose integrity and service to others. I'm going to leave it off right there. I will see you guys in the next video for part 2 of chapter 1. Bye.